Welcome to CSGuitars, the science of loud. The Crush series of amplifiers from Orange Amplification are super popular. They are Orange's line of solid-state amplifiers which range all the way from tiny little practice amps to fully featured gig-worthy devices to rival their flagship Valve models. This is the latest in the series, the Supercrush 100. It's a fascinating amplifier, and I'll be doing several videos on this, detailing the solid-state technology of the unit and comparing it to everything else in the Crush range. But for today, I want to focus on the features overview and the sounds that we can get from this, because if you're looking for the Rockerverb sound on a budget, this is the amplifier for you. Now, modern solid-state amplifiers sound incredible, and the Orange Crush amps especially defy that outdated rationale that transistors are terrible and valves are the only way to go. Solid-state amplifiers are completely viable solutions for both live and recording situations. The Supercrush takes this up another few notches with the implementation of two very important design features. Firstly, the preamp has been completely redesigned to feature a Class A topology using discrete JFETs, and I'll go into a lot of detail about exactly what that means in a follow-up video all about solid-state technology. But the thing to understand at the moment is that JFETs are a type of transistor that operate in a very similar manner to the triode valves we'd usually find inside a valve preamp section, and can be used in pretty much the same circuit architecture. So if Orange were to try and replicate the valve preamp of, say, their Rockerverb amplifier as closely as possible, using JFETs would allow them to do so without drastically altering the circuit layout, meaning that we would retain the sound and response characteristics far closer than if we were to use MOSFETs or op-amps as they have done with their previous Crush amplifiers. The second really important design feature is the power amp. This is 100 watts, Class AB push-pull super clean high headroom power amp capable of taking any preamp signal or pedal signal into it and amplifying it perfectly while still giving the push-pull interaction that valve amp players will be used to. Now if that sounds very similar to another popular Orange product, then that's because it is, and if you don't want the nightmares to return, then look away now.
My little baby sharing is wholesome. My pedal baby is just like the real thing. You can hug her and feed her and plug your guitar in for awesome newborn tones.
Yes, that's right. Orange have essentially put a Pedal Baby 100 as the power section of this amplifier, and it makes total sense. They've gone and developed this high headroom, clean solid-state power amp, so it makes sense to reuse that design in their other solid-state amplifiers. So we have a combination of a JFET preamp section, which is pretty much as close to a valve preamp section as you're going to get without putting valves in it, and a Pedal Baby style high headroom power section, all in one convenient box with the additional features of having an effects loop, a cabinet simulated DI out, foot switch connectability, and a digital reverb which sounds incredible on the clean channel as we're about to find out. The logic for setting up your sound on a solid-state amplifier is a little bit different from what you would do on a valve amplifier. In this case, we want to get all of our sound from the preamp, cranking those channel volumes to our desired levels, and then using the master volume as low as possible for our desired volume output. The reason we're doing this is because we want as much headroom on the power amp as possible, because we don't want to run the risk of ever pushing the solid-state power amp into clipping. So unlike a valve amplifier where it's often desirable to defeat the headroom in the power section and push those power valves into saturation and distortion, there's no such benefit from doing so with a solid state amp. We want to retain as much headroom as possible to prevent the power section going into clipping, because clipping in a power section on a solid state amp always sounds bad. Although we should never find ourselves in that situation with the supercrush, as there's so much headroom here that even at gigging volumes we're never going to be at that sort of range on the master control. In terms of sounds, we're going to start with the amplifier just on its own, running into the Hofnine 212 cabinet, and the sound will be captured by Lewitt microphones, giving you an idea of what this amplifier would sound like if you were using it with a cabinet. We'll then throw a few effects on there so you can get an idea of the range of this amplifier when used in a more realistic setup, with effects both going into the front and in the effects loop. And finally, we'll take a look at what I think is a very important feature, the DI out with analog cabinet simulation. There's a button on there for closed back and open back style sound, so two different EQ characteristics to dial in the sort of tone we want. This will allow us to send an XLR feed directly to the sound desk in a live environment, or directly to our interface for recording, so that we don't have to mic up a loud cabinet and disturb our neighbours like I'm about to do. One of the major advantages of solid-state components is how cleanly they can amplify, and that's certainly demonstrated here in the clean channel. Even using hotter humbuckers, which would usually begin driving the clean channels of my low wattage valve amps, the supercrush stays super clean, which bodes well for when we start putting compression and boosts onto this later on. The digi-reverb sounds enormous even at lower settings, so it should be used sparingly, but man does it do wonders for filling out a clean sound. The distortion sounds are very much in that Rockerverb area, and there is a lot of distortion here if we want to get heavy. The only thing that I feel the supercrush lacks from its valve counterparts is that real-time tactile feel you get when playing a valve amplifier, but that's very much just a player experience thing. You listening to the sounds in this video, or anyone listening to the amp when you play it to them, is not going to be able to tell that difference. Now, very few people are going to be using an amplifier just on its own, so let's get a few pedals in here and generate the kind of sounds we'd actually use with this amp. I feel the supercrush really comes to life with the right seasoning of pedals just sprinkled on there. Adding a very light overdrive to the clean channel just brings back that valve shimmer, just a bit more convincingly valve clean section, taking the edge off the super clean solid state response. Although there is enough headroom here to cope with these super clean compressor style sounds. For those leads, kicking the front end with the ego driver lifts the level enough to make the distortion sharper and the EQ brighter than the amp gain would be on its own, and it absolutely swallows up that flanger in the effects loop and doesn't get bogged down and overwhelmed. But that's all through the cabinet. The real test will be the cab simulated DI out. This is a very important feature for a lot of people, so this needs to sound good. My one criticism of this sound is that it's a little bit full range, which is a nice way of saying there's a bit too much high frequency content in there. Guitar speakers don't reproduce the entire audible spectrum evenly. They typically attenuate very sharply above 5 kHz and don't reproduce that high frequency fizz that's generated in an amplifier under distortion. Fortunately, we can mitigate this by using some EQ in post. A very simple low-pass filter set around the 5K range will just take off that high-frequency fizz and sound a lot more convincingly like a microphone on a cabinet. This is something you can accomplish very easily in your DAW when recording the amplifier, and it's something the sound engineer will do live at the sound desk, but it's worth keeping in mind, otherwise you would get a very fizzy sound when recording at high gain settings. The Supercrush uses an EQ circuit to shape this cabinet simulation by analog means. It's completely usable, but by no means the best analog cab sim I've ever heard. This is perhaps one place where Orange could use some improvement on, getting a more natural sounding analog cabinet simulator, or allowing us the option to switch it off entirely so that users can apply cabinet impulse responses in post, which I think would achieve better results, at least in a recording environment. All told, the Supercrush sounds super good, especially through a cabinet. I've played a lot of valve amplifiers, including Orange's flagship models, and this could rival any of them in terms of sounds. Removing the valves also means removing the output transformer, meaning a lighter weight and more compact head shell, and this is available as a combo if you want this very amplifier in the same box as your speaker. If you want to find out more about the Orange Supercrush and the prices, links will be in the description. And don't forget to click all those buttons you're supposed to make this video viable to the ever-changing whims of the YouTube algorithm. That's all for now. Keep it loud and stay safe. Orange.